if the market is not huge, but you may find certain diseases are controlled that aren't on the label by the biopesticides and biofungicides. Rhizoctonia fusarium, Phytophthora, Pythium, Cylindrocladium, these are all diseases that you can find a biofungicide that will control them. This is a simple photo of the two flats on the left. This is organic mescaline mixed lettuce seed. So organic seed, not treated with any preventative fungicides. On the left, there's a soil biofungicide incorporated in the soil. On the right, there isn't. There's your germination percentage. It's basically due to seedling damping off. In this case, with organic seed, it really shows the emphasis of how well the biofungicide works in the soil mix. So when we talk about pesticides, we always talk about the mode of action, and traditionally we rotate chemicals because if you use the same chemical over and over again with the same mode of action, chances are the organism is going to develop resistance to it, the pathogen. Basically, biofungicides have multiple modes of action, and it's because of these multiple modes of action that you will seldom see resistance develop to them. So the mode of action basically refers to the how that a particular biofungicide works against a pathogen. So far, they've identified 6 what we would call sort of categories of modes of action within biofungicides, and those are exclusion, competition, parasitism, antibiosis, nutrient availability, and induced resistance, both SAR and ISR, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. And I believe that tomorrow at some point, Brad Friedveld from TerraLink is going to go into depth, a great deal about induced systemic resistance and other ways that plants' immune systems get triggered by certain products. So exclusion, and this is the way that a lot of the biofungicides will work, is basically where they can grow in the media near the plant roots, and they will basically outcompete the bad guys. So they're going to occupy space and outcompete them and exclude them. Some grow directly on the plant roots and colonize the entire root system, and this is termed Rhizosphere Competency. And a soil biofungicide grows in such a way as to dominate the same area a pathogen wants to occupy, and it just physically excludes it. So, you know, if you think of a plant, the area around the plant roots in that root zone area as a giant buffet table for microbes, a lot of the soil biofungicides are very, very good at getting in there and just muscling everybody else out of that space and excluding them. There's a slide here of Trichoderma T22, which is coiling around a plant's roots. I'm going to see if I got a pointer on here. Hang on a second. Oh, look at that. There we go. So basically, this is the Trichoderma fungus. It's growing in and around the plant roots, and it has a pretty intimate relationship with the plant roots and in the media. And it'll actually prevent pathogens from getting in or getting at your plant roots just by being there in the spots that the pathogen wants to get in as well too. Okay, here's the point where I test to see if everyone's awake. It's trivia, Canadian trivia. Can anyone answer this question? What is Canada's highest mountain peak? And I will make it worth your while. Move. Nope. Close. It's probably in the Yukon. Nope. Might start with an L. Logan. Very good, sir. Mount Logan in the Yukon. For your trouble, I have a nice 20 times ambulance, well lit, fireworks, rendered on it. Thank you. So, I'm sure the next question will be a lot of hands up. Mount Logan. So, other modes of action. Competition. So, basically, why pathogens attack plants? They're after food. They get attracted to the root exudates. And basically, some of the soil biofungicides can remove the simple organic and inorganic compounds released from roots. So your plant roots are giving off inorganic compounds that the bad guys find favorable. Some of the biofungicides have a mode of action where they can actually consume that, and they'll remove those plant root exudates from that root area. And beneficial microbes feeding upon root exudates will remove those enticements, like everything's about food, that may actually attract the pathogens. So your pythiums, your rhizoctonias and phytophthora, they're all going, a lot of them sense those root exudates, and that's how they know to go after those roots and get in there. A lot of the soil biofungicides will actually digest or alter those root exudate compounds so that the bad guys can't, they basically don't know where they're going. They lost their direction. And there's no food there, so why would they even bother going? Competitive exclusion is a good slide here where you can see, again, the strands of the Trichoderma T22 that are growing on a root. And a lot of that, where that Trichoderma T22, where it's growing on the root, on the outside of the root, there's stuff leaking from that root that it is really attracted to, and it'll get there first and exclude anybody else from getting into that root. So that's where your pythiums are going to get in. That's where the rhizoctonias attack, fusarium. Parasitism. Now this is pretty cool. So some of your biofungicides will actively send their mycelia out in the growing media and around the root zone, and they'll actively drill holes in and kill other fungal species and a lot of the pathogens. So they're not just sitting there passively excluding them. There are certain biofungicides where they're just like a mushroom. They're growing through the media with the mycelia, and when they come across a strand of rhizoctonia or pythium, they just drill a hole in it. They secrete enzymes and just kill it. So it's called parasitism. Here you can see, this is a classic shot of T22 attacking a strand of rhizoctonia and actually drilling holes in it, and there's, when the trichoderma is removed, there's a dead strand of rhizoctonia. So it's pretty cool when you got a fungus that runs around killing other fungus. Any questions? Anything? We're gonna have a long time for coffee. No.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
Do you apply that when you're mixing the soils? You have like soil solution, you're gonna break it up, break it back?
The soil biofungicides and biopesticides in general, the formulations have gotten much better than they were, say, 10 years ago. And with the soil biofungicides, a lot of them can be pre-incorporated into your media before you get it. You can do it yourself. Most of them are available as a wettable powder version, so you use them just like you would any other chemical. Again, they're living organisms, so you don't want to mix them up and leave them sitting in the corner for 2 weeks before you use them. You want to use them up right away when you activate them. In this particular case with trichoderma, when you apply it to soil or media, it very quickly, within 24 to 48 hours, it very quickly germinates and sends all its mycelia through that media and really sets up shop and kind of owns that space for a long period of time. We'll get into some of the advantages and the disadvantages of them, but yeah, basically ease of application, it's there. The manufacturers have gone to great lengths to develop really stable formulations and products that are fairly easy to apply, but still they involve some working knowledge of how to get the best efficacy out of them. So, and we'll go through some of that in the slideshow. But good question.
Is it possible to have too many good fungus?
No, they just they find a balance, and that's sort of the thing you have to realize too, that when you take a sterile growing media, or if you're growing in the soil and you sterilize the soil, that you've basically wiped out all the soil microbes. Or if you're growing in a peat perlite or a peat cocoa based mix or rock wool, there's no establishment or pre-establishment of any beneficial microbes. They come. I mean, the bad guys can come, and I mean, a week after you water in fertilized rock wool wah, or you're going to have hundreds of species of soil bacteria and fungus, most of which do nothing. I mean, they're just there occupying space or trying to get some food, right, to survive. Some of them could be beneficial. Some of them might behave like a mycorrhizae. The products that I'm speaking about today are registered, so they have gone through the rigors of government testing, and efficacy has been provided, so we know that these species will prevent disease. And it's all preventative. These will not cure disease. So you have to be proactive in using them in order to keep the disease out of your crop. So, yeah. Sorry. Fungicide, curative, yes. You can use, you have to check with the manufacturer on which products are compatible, but if you do have plant material that is diseased, you must treat it with a curative chemical and then apply your biofungicide after that. Some are even compatible. I know that the trichoderma, the T22 products there's a long list of fungicides you can actually tank mix with them and apply them. There's some that you can't. There's some products that will kill these trichoderma species. So it's Bentley. I don't know the active in Banner Max, but Banner's one of them. Most of the common active ingredients today used in agriculture, your subdues, your Ridomils, Senator, Elliott, you can use a lot of things with them. There's compatibility charts. Most of the manufacturers have gone to great lengths in figuring out which products can be tank mixed with them. So if you're going to use a soil biofungicide, I strongly recommend that you do some research on the website, the manufacturer's website, and or ask your distributor reps, where can I get a hold of this compatibility chart, because there's a lot of compatibility and there's some that you definitely cannot use. So, did that answer your question? I'm not sure. Yeah, okay, good.
Are most of them sprayed on in, or some of them blended in?
Soil biofungicides are generally applied as a drench, or they're pre-incorporated in the soil. There are biofungicides that do work on foliar pathogens that can be applied as a spray. The labels will tell you which some can be applied both ways, and depending on the pathogen you're after. But for the root zone, for the health of the root zone, most of the products are applied to the soil media, either prior to planting, it's pre-incorporated, or you can apply it when you seed or when you transplant into nutrients. In-furrow applications, there's a lot of in-furrow applications if you're doing an outdoor crop. Again, just check the labels on the products. The labels have a lot of information on them. And the manufacturer's websites actually have a tremendous amount of information and tech sheets if you're looking for specific information. And if you have other questions, I'm available. I won't say 24/7, but I'm available. You're more than welcome to contact me or email me in person if you want to talk about a certain situation or a certain crop that you've got where you're thinking of changing up, your disease control program, or if you have a specific disease issue that you don't want to bring up here, or whatever. I'm open. That's what I do. That's my job. Yeah, we'll get into some of that as well too. There's lots of good products registered for powdery mildew. There's a lot that aren't. How shall we say? They're not an organism, so I won't talk about them today. But we can, if we want to do a sidebar on, or have a little parking lot conversation on other products that are basically considered biopesticides, but they're not an organism. Downy? No. That one's too tough for me. No. Downy's a challenge, that's for sure. And depending on the crop you're growing as well, too. Fusarium and diseases like that in the soil, we can talk certainly about control strategies for certain diseases. Because depending on your crop, if you're monoculture, if you have diseases like Downy or Fusarium, once they're in a facility, it's hard to get rid of them. You have to manage them. It's hard to eradicate. Okay, modes of action. Again, this is, I think it's number 3 or number 4, but antibiosis. So a lot of these beneficial soil biopesticides or soil biofungicides will produce metabolites that inhibit other fungal and bacterial species from developing and growing. So if soil biofungicides release secondary metabolites that have an inhibitory effect on pathogens, most importantly cell wall or cell membrane formation. So the bad guys have to reproduce to infect, and in order to reproduce, they're just other fungus. If your biofungicide produces a metabolite that is antifungal in nature, that's how it defends its turf, it is actually producing a chemical-like compound that keeps the other fungal species or bacterial species from being able to reproduce. Many bacterial-based soil biofungicides, you're going to see all the bacillus products and a few of the other ones use this mode of action, and they often require shorter reapplication intervals. So you have to reapply them more often, because what you get is sort of an antimicrobial burst when you apply them to the soil that lasts for 3 to 4 weeks. But it's good to know. I mean, you can definitely see excellent control of soil diseases by using them. So what do we say by antibiosis and metabolite production? So I'm not sure which streptomyces, maybe in the bottom corner of the slide. What you have is a fungal pathogen in that petri dish, and the beneficial soil microenvironment one is here, and you'll see a zone of inhibition. And if you can imagine your growing media or your root zone that's filled with the biofungicide organism, and it's producing all those metabolites that are antifungal in nature, it's going to be pretty tough for the bad guys to get going. So when we talk about inhibiting spore germination, Bacillus subtilis, which is your cease, rhapsody, serenade, it's all the same active ingredient, Bacillus subtilis. With the Mycoinsecticides, so this organism, it's a simple fungal organism that's starting to germinate and send its mycelia out. That's how they grow. The bad guys grow all the same way. Without any bacillus in that dish, and here's with the bacillus, they are either actively killed or they're unable to germinate because of the metabolite production from the biofungicide. So they'll just sit there and do nothing, or they'll die because they can't germinate and grow. Same product, bacillus, that strain, that QST 713, it's important because you're going to see now and then over the next 10 years, you're going to see a lot of new products come on the market, and they're probably going to be different strains of this particular Bacillus subtilis family. Is huge, naturally found soil occurring bacterium that they have a lot of different strains being developed right now. This one in particular is probably the most widely used and widely known, the QST 713. It actually releases antifungal lipopeptides. So this is an enzyme. So this bacterium is able to release an enzyme that digests the cell walls of other fungal and bacterial pathogens, which is really good to know because you have a soil biofungicide here that also kills bacteria. So free bacteria, they're floating around in they splash from one plant to the next. They move around freely in water in your root system. If you're using this product as a drench, it's going to kill anything Erwinia, Xanthomonas, Pseudomonas, those bacteria species that are moving around in the water. And at the same time, it's going to inhibit a lot of fungal pathogens from developing as well, too. So basically, the cyclic lipopeptides will go out and dissolve the cell wall, or they'll weaken the cell wall of a fungal or a bacterial pathogen. And it just, that enzyme just kills them, just digests the cell walls, and they die. You have and that's a very good question. It depends. You have a living organism. No two situations are identical. And I think that's what you'll find when you start working with soil biofungicides is you need to know your crop. You need to know the disease pressure. Like you go in there with a certain rate, and it's a living organism. You know you're going to get 3-4 weeks worth of protection out of it, depending on the time of the year. if you have severe, intense disease pressure, super wet conditions that favor the bad guys, or if something happens where you're applying a fungicide and it weakens the biofungicide, you could possibly see disease. These things aren't bulletproof, but they work as a preventative. Under normal conditions or under moderate disease pressure conditions, they work extremely well. So, how often do you have to reapply? The label will give you recommendations. Grower experience will tell you more. So if you have a specific crop in a specific area in a specific time of the year, we can probably make better recommendations. But again, it's working with the products and getting to know that in January, February, March, it probably lasts this long. In July and August, in the heat of the summer, you're probably going to have to reapply more frequently just because of the nature of the beast. It's just, there's more disease pressure there. Nutrient availability, this is listed as a mode of action. It is a mode of action. It's not something that we really try to market with the registered biofungicides. But nutrients, they need to be in a reduced form, making them water soluble to make them available for absorption by a plant's root system. Some of the soil biofungicides release reducing agents and chelating agents that make nutrients more soluble and available to the root, allowing for better utilization of the fertilizer being applied. So again, some of these registered biofungicides will behave like a mycorrhiza. They will actually have a very nice relationship with your plant roots and the soiling, and they will make nutrients more available. Does that kill pathogens? Well, we can argue that plant roots are healthier and the plants are more robust, and they're able to fend off the bad guys that way there as well too. But a lot of these biofungicides do interact with your plant and your crop's roots and have a very positive effect on growth. Induced resistance, again, I'm not going to speak a lot on this because I think Brad's going to cover this tomorrow in depth. Certain soil biofungicides, especially the trichoderma and the bacillus species, have been shown to turn on specific compounds produced in a plant's root system that kind of naturally defend the plant from the inside out. Two types, induced systemic resistance, and then there's systemic acquired resistance. That's all I'm going to mention. And this is a hot topic today amongst researchers and people around the world that are trying to develop ways of alternative to chemical controls for disease, pest and disease control. So you'll see this talked about a lot in the next 5 to 10 years. Other modes of action, I'm sure there's still lots of undiscovered beneficial microbes out there that work different ways, that we're going to see some really good things come down the pipe. And good research topics for future graduate students around the world. I'm sure that there's lots of work being done on it. Oh, here we go. Who can name Saskatchewan's official mineral? You got it. You didn't raise your hand. Shout it out. Yeah, it's potash. I thought that one was confused. I thought the first one was the birds. Summary. This is the end part, and it's where you can ask lots of questions if you want. I'm not watching the time because I had 2 hours. So. Oh, good luck. We're going to have a long break. So, emphasize the fact that most of the soil biofungicides, if not all of them, are primarily preventative. So you plan to use them to prevent disease. I get calls from a lot of growers that have issues with their roots and they want to know if they can use our products to help them. Once the plant is diseased, the only way that you can pretty much fix that, I think, is by applying a curative chemical. You can move forward with a soil biofungicide after that, but a lot of the soil biofungicides will not go, they're not going in the roots to fix the problem. They're going to keep the problem from occurring. So, and again, if you're using curative chemicals and you are using soil biofungicide, you need to check with the manufacturer or a distributor rep to get the information as to whether you can mix that chemical fungicide with the biofungicide product that you're using. Last thing you want to do is wipe out, your beneficials that you've applied by using a chemical active ingredient that's going to harm them. Plus is, again, very little chance of resistance development when you're using biofungicides. Even if they're in a rotation with conventional chemicals, you're still going to extend the usefulness of that active ingredient in the chemical. Safe and effective. So this is a hot topic. A lot of your businesses are, they're lifestyle businesses. You work in them. You're applying pest and disease control products when they need to be applied, and you're around them all the time. So biofungicides are extremely safe, and they work. They're very effective. Often you'll see 0 to 4 hour reentry times on them, and they're not kidding. Like literally, and on food crops, you can apply them, pick and ship 4 hours later. They're that safe. Formulations over the years have been developed to be more stable. They tolerate a wider range of environmental factors, temperatures, and pH. And know that you can use biofungicides in conjunction with traditional fungicides. Just check that compatibility list. Be aware of product shelf life. These are living organisms, and they do expire. They tend to have a best before date. Often, depending on the product, it can be anywhere from 3 months to 18 months. And sometimes it varies on how you store them. So check the label, and if it recommends storage at 4 degrees Celsius, they know that product is going to remain viable if you store it at 4 degrees Celsius, longer than keeping it at room temperature. And we talked about safety. So being proactive, using soil biofungicides, ordering what you need, try not to order more than you need for 3 or 4 months so that you don't deal with expired product or product that may not be viable anymore if you're hanging on to it too long. And just know that you're dealing with a living organism. There's some pretty roots that were treated with trichoderma. Actually, in another species of trichoderma, there's 2 species of trichoderma in that product. And questions. So feel free, if there's something that I haven't covered, if there's a burning question that you've got on anything in particular.
So what are some of the trade names for like trichoderma and that bacillus?
So Root Shield and Root Shield Plus, and there's a bunch of different formulations. They're manufactured by Bioworks. Bayer purchased AgriQuest, who manufactures the Bacillus subtilis QST 713. That's probably the most widely used Bacillus product. It's manufactured in Mexico, so Serenade is registered, I think, for outdoor ag crops. Cease and Rhapsody are greenhouse. I think Rhapsody's got turf on it as well too. It's all the same organism. One's the indoor, the greenhouse version is a liquid version, which I think a lot of growers prefer to work with. If you want, we can talk a little bit about application methods and what works best. Actinovate. Let me go back to my, if I can even read it here. You do have a gliocladium in pre-stop. Pre-stop's another product that's a gliocladium, which basically produces a lot of soil metabolites and keeps the bad guys from. I didn't mention, as a biofungicide, I didn't mention Regalia Max, but I think Brad will probably be talking about the extract from giant knotweed and how it induces a plant's an immune system. Let me see what I'm missing here. Actinovate, Mycostop, there's another good product, which is Streptomyces. That's a bacteria. And Actinovate is, Streptomyces. They're 2 different strains. The Mycostop is a different strain than what's in Actinovate. And check the label. Some of these products have soil applications. Some of them have a foliar disease control application. Some have both. But the list is not huge. So the products that are here, they're proven. They do work. They'll fit very nicely into any preventative control program for root disease, root issues. Just be aware, and there's more coming. I know there's a lot of work being done to develop these products, and some of the larger some of the larger chemical companies have been very busy acquiring some of the smaller biopesticide companies in the last 3 to 4 years. So the big guys are jumping on board, and and they'll help. They're going to help fast track more beneficial products to help you guys control pests and diseases.
So as a someone just getting into the whole greenhouse biofungicide, what would you recommend as a great starter, or I'm just not sure what the best product to start with instead of trial and error.
Okay, so I'm from being a grower now, from helping growers for a number of years. Basically, I would look at what you currently produce. If you have root issues or your disease issues, and look at ways. It's not just applying biofungicides and it's going to go away. Take a look at your whole your production, your water. Most of the root pathogens are mobile in water, and they come in your water. I mean, if you're not treating your water, then there's a good chance in the summertime you might be helping the bad guys out because they're reproducing in your water, especially if you recirculate. But know the crop, know your diseases. So identify where you're experiencing shrink, like losses, or reduction in growth, or where you're applying chemicals, and really try to pinpoint an area where a biofungicide can be introduced to try and help you preventatively from having to apply so many chemicals to try to control that disease. I'll talk to people about root shield use, and if they tell me they don't have any root issues, then I say you don't need root shield. It's fine, it's simple. But I think if they tell me they don't have root issues, it just sort of, because everybody's got root issues, it's sort of one of those things, well, call me when you're willing to talk about it, right? So identify where your most sensitive crops are and where you see issues with disease, maybe where historically you might have had it 1 year bad and 2 years it was okay, and then again the third or fourth year you've got to deal with this issue again, where it's hitting economically, it's hitting you in the pocketbook. That's where you really need to sit down and take a more proactive approach to preventing that disease. And it could even be as simple as cleaning your tanks. It's just understanding where the pathogen's coming from. A lot of pathogens come in on your incoming plant material. They've already got disease when you get them. You don't know it. It shows up, a week or two after transplant, or in fusarium. In the case of fusarium, I mean, the plant can live with it for 3 months before a period of stress, and the fusarium will actually take over and take your crop down. So understanding your loss, where you're significantly challenged in controlling root diseases, and then developing a plan that don't expect a biopesticide to be a silver bullet. It might be part of the solution, but really it's got to be an integrated approach, just like you do with pest management. So, and if you have a rock solid crop that never sees any root issues, then chances are you don't have to worry about it. But it seems like every year that goes by, we have more and more issues of growers fighting Pythium. Botrytis now has become very resistant to a lot of different chemicals out there. It's just, you're going to continually face a world of fewer and fewer chemicals you can use that are effective, and fewer options that way, and probably more and more safer products that you just have to learn to work with. So.
Is there anything registered for deep water culture?
I don't know of anything. I know, when we test trichoderma levels on roots in deep water culture, it's there. It prefers to be in something organic. So deep water culture, I don't know that there's a lot known about it. Certainly, if you're talking about like floating lettuce or something like that, the young plant production, the plug production, biofungicides work marvelously on a peat, cocoa, jiffy, liner, whatever it is you're producing your floating lettuce in, and they end up going into an aqua system or whatever. No, and I think that deep water culture you have to be particularly sensitive to root diseases because it's a different environment than growing in a rock wool or even a soilless media for the soil. So sorry, I can't help you much there. I don't know which of the other products are registered for fusarium. We have Root Shield is particularly effective at preventing fusarium. Unfortunately, fusarium it's a tough disease because it can be seed-borne. It's a challenge because it can remain in a facility for many, many years, especially if your facility is monoculture. It's hard to get rid of it, and if you let your guard down or if you have a period of stress on the plant, it can be particularly troublesome once it gets in there. We see a lot of good efficacy against fusarium with root shield in propagation. But again, if it's a seed crop and there's fusarium coming in the seed, there's not much you're going to do to protect it. It's a challenge. Cut flower growers use a lot of trichoderma in the ground if they're growing cut flowers in the soil, especially for monoculture crops that are very susceptible to fusarium, freesias and lisianthus and things like that. We'll see a lot of the growers incorporate using the trichoderma as part of their control program. Their strategy's got to be multifaceted. They're in there, they're culling every week, they're making sure they're pulling out the sources of disease and inoculum if they see anything with fusarium. They're very, very strict about the cleanliness and the hygiene of the facility because fusarium will wipe you out if you are monoculture, if you don't figure out a way to manage it. Yeah.
Colin, the temperature storage tolerance, say 3 to 18 months, what are the temperature ranges for the broad majority of
They vary widely, and the shelf life varies depending on the type of the organism and the formulation of the product. I'll recite the one I know best, which is the root shielded product that we work with. For example, root shield wettable powder. From the date we manufacture it, it has a use before on the box. The top of the box is 4 months from date of manufacture. Use it up. If we assume you store it at room temperature. If you refrigerate it, it's 6 months from date of manufacture. If you freeze it, it's 8 months. So you double the shelf life in the freezer with that product. Some of these products cannot be frozen, but in this particular, so check the website. Like I know the Bioworks website has fantastic recommendations on shelf life and how you should store the product, and you really do want to try to preserve that product as best as you can. I know our distributors keep everything in cold storage to help extend that and keep the product more viable. And again, you know what? The manufacturers are constantly working on getting more stable formulations and extending shelf life because it can be an issue. But I think if you look at your production when you decide to use the products, and you don't try not to keep too much in your storage area and plan ahead, it can be managed and it has been managed for many, many years, so that we're not throwing product away. So.
Any test for the biofungicide when you store it and after that?
Yeah.
You will be storing that biofungicide and after that test for the checking these are active or not?
Yeah, we do. We offer that service. So if you have product that's expired, you can send in a sample to the lab at Bioworks, and they test it, and they come up with a percentage viability, and we'll make recommendations to use the product up or throw it away based on our ability to count the colony forming units in the package. That's how we guarantee our concentration of the organism in the original package. The other cool thing about the trichoderma product is we offer the service of where we'll actually sort of give you an indication of how well the product has colonized your plant roots. So our lab can take a root assay, so they basically wash the root shield off the plant roots, and they'll plate it out, and they'll do reduction series on agar plates, and they'll give you an idea of what the levels of colony forming units are per gram of root tissue, and the higher the level, remember, it's about outnumbering the bad guys, right? So the higher the level, the better. And we do this often with first-time customers that just want to know whether they did a good job with the application or whether the product's there. And I mean, really, it doesn't tell you whether you're going to get root disease or not. It just tells you whether the product's there, because if you have waterlogged conditions, or if there's huge amounts of disease pressure present and the disease can outnumber the trichoderma, then, you know. But it is a good tool for people that want to double check to make sure that their application went on properly.
How much the expenditure for that? Just
Sorry?
how much the expenditure, and how much the cost?
Ship it to our office, or ship it to my house, and I'll ship it to our office. So you incur no cost other than maybe the shipping cost of getting it there. Turnaround's like a week and a half, maybe a week from when we get it at the lab. 3 days I've seen it sometimes, but and again, it helps. It's a tool to help people know that the product's there. And I've seen it happen where, you know, somebody used expired product. I found out after because there wasn't any root shield present. And things can go wrong in the application. We mess up a rate, or an injector doesn't work, or something. So it's not a bad idea to check if you're using the product. I don't know about the other products as far as what they can do to test. I haven't heard of it. I know. I'm not sure about the other manufacturers' products, but for sure, with the root shield product, we can test it.
So do you recommend that if you are going to use biofungicides, that you use them throughout your whole crop? For myself, I have multi-crops. So do I just specifically go to the problem that I've had in the past, or use it throughout the whole grain?
Well, it's funny, like with the biofungicides, people that over the years, and we've got almost 20 years of experience in the U.S. working with a lot of different growers, and people that understand and they get the benefit and they get the disease control, understand, they use them in all their crops. They use them, and they're often customers that come back every year. For people who have never used them before and they're reluctant to use them in their entire production, I often take your propagation. You're going to see the most bang for your buck. Young plants are very susceptible to disease. When you see plants propagated with biofungicides versus chemicals, chemicals are very hard on young plants, and use them if you have to, but biofungicides tend to give your young plants a much better start. Seeds respond extremely well, and you get much higher germination percentages with a biofungicide in your plug mix. Take a crop where you have a disease that you might see at certain times of the year, and do a trial. Incorporate the soil biofungicide into your media for that crop, and then reapply. And that's the other thing. These, again, they don't last forever. That's a common misconception that these microbes get in there and they're happy and they reproduce and they're there all the time. They don't do that simply because of the Mother Nature likes balance, right? So when you apply the initial application, you put lots of that beneficial microbe in that given area, that root zone, so that it can outcompete the other pathogens in there. Every day after you do that drench, there's hundreds of species of bacteria, other guys, and fungus that are in there. Every day they're chipping away at that soil beneficial. And over time, you're going to see them kind of get worn away. And again, Mother Nature is about balance, so the bad guys are going to eventually take hold if the conditions are right, and you need to reapply the biofungicide based on the manufacturer's recommendations. And some of them are quite frequent. Some of them are, the trichoderma, the root shield product, is every 10 weeks. That's the recommendation. So if you're growing a short-term crop, one application is probably good enough. Perennial nursery growers, greenhouse vegetable growers, tomato and pepper guys, they'll often reapply every 10 weeks. And it's a half rate. So you don't actually, so the soil, the beneficial microbe is still there, it's just not there present enough quantities to help. So often the reapplication is a half rate drench in order to bring the beneficial organisms back up to the levels where it's going to prevent disease for another 4 to 10 weeks. So propagation, if you've never tried it, it's incredible sometimes the differences you'll see in propagation. Young plants respond very favorably to soil biofungicides, and then target certain areas within your production where you know you've historically had issues with diseases that they're labeled for. So yes?
How do you drench exactly with the sugar irrigation system? Does it filter first?
Yes. Okay, so most of them are fine enough that, and they're manufactured to the point where they're fine enough where you can run them through pressure compensated drip systems. They won't go through sand filters, and often if you have a pre-filter that's over-engineered, if it's 200 micron, a very fine screen, you have to pull that out, but yeah, most of the products will pass through a pressure compensated drip system, so you don't have to worry about plugging. I get questions all the time about, oh, I'm using hydrogen peroxide, I'm using chlorine dioxide, I got city water and it's got chlorine in it. Most normal levels of water treatment, like 2 ppm, 3 ppm of chlorine peroxide, less than 100 ppm, you're not going to hurt a lot of these beneficial microbes. Don't mix them in the stock tank. Obviously, the super concentrated, that's just a no-no. Some of them can be mixed in line with fertilizer. So if you have a crop that you've got to fertilize, at a 2.2 EC, and you can inject your root shield in line to apply it, go right ahead. Just don't mix the root shield in the stock tank. You can do that, but you got to get rid of it within an hour. Otherwise, it'll kill the spores of the trichoderma that are in there. All right.
Soil moisture levels affect
It's a good question. So when we incorporate root shield granules into growers' media, it's sort of very dry. They don't deliver water. They don't truck water all across the country because it's expensive. So often you'll get compressed bales of soil with granules incorporated into them. That won't really, until it's watered, it won't activate the product. So you've got up to 20 weeks to use that product up. But the minute you add water, especially with the trichoderma, what you're getting in the product, you're getting some dry mycelia and you're getting spores. So there's a reproductive spore stage that we manufacture and harvest, and that's what you're getting. As soon as it hits water, they start to germinate, not like any other fungus, and they'll send their mycelia out, and they start looking for roots and organic matter. So do they survive in water for long periods of time? No. Like 2-3 days later, if they don't find some organic matter or some roots to colonize around, then chances are they'll just die or peter out in water. So a lot of growers that recirculate their irrigation water, they'll do a drench with our product, and the next day or a week later, they'll send a sample off, a water sample, and test for trichoderma and go, hey, nothing in here, what's going on? Well, trichoderma doesn't live in water. It lives in organic matter and on plant roots. So you're not going to find it in solution. So mix it, apply it. Within 24 to 48 hours, it's going to grow in that media. I hope you wouldn't have that media super saturated or underwater, sitting underwater, with plants in it for any length of time. So, yeah, I don't know. Does that answer your question, sort of? Yeah? Okay.
Did you say a mix of biofungicide in it is only good for 20 weeks? Or?
Yeah, I think there's a mix, Premier Tech sells soil that has bacillus incorporated. And I've got it on my list. It's a different bacillus than the one that you apply as the drench or the foliar. And I'm not sure. I think they claim it's good for like years, but I don't know how long it would be effective in there. And certainly, we get a lot of questions from growers that are using beneficial mycorrhizas, like products that enhance growth. How do they work? They work together. Yeah, you're not going to see any issues using most of the soil biofungicides. Mycorrhiza is still going to survive and do its thing as well too. So, and some of these products behave like a mycorrhiza, so you're going to see some of the similar benefits.
Is there something you recommend for dealing with botrytis?
Botrytis foliar applications, the bacillus is working very good, so the cease rhapsody, extremely good. Root shield, we have, it's funny because you've got our labels, okay. Formulations, the older Root Shield formulation was good for botrytis. The Root Shield HC, which you can still get, although it's almost being phased out. It has a lot of clay in it, and you have to mix it in a bucket and decant it. The new Root Shield wettable powder has a different formulation where it can be dissolved immediately and sent through pressure concentrator. The carrier in the new Root Shield WP, we didn't get approval for foliar applications on the label for the Root Shield WP. So yes, it can have some efficacy against botrytis, but be careful because the carrier in the Root Shield WP is different and it can cause phyto on foliar applications on plants, certain types of plants. Actinovate works really well, I think, for botrytis as a foliar spray. So some of these soil beneficial microbes also work extremely well on foliar diseases as well too. But my favorite is that CISA Rhapsody through an LVM unit, cold fog if you've got it, pulse fog it if you want. Most of the foliar applications with these biofungicides, they're not systemic. If you don't hit it, you're not going to kill it. Just keep that in mind when you're spraying a great big overgrown cucumber crop with a powdery mildew on it, and the leaves are overlapping. If you don't hit that powdery mildew, you're not going to kill it. So your choice of application equipment when you're applying foliar, any of the biopesticides, 200 micron or smaller, think of it not as high volume, spraying to runoff. You need really good coverage. So the crop does not have to be wet when you go through it. You just need very uniform, very tiny droplet sizes. So LVM equipment, if you can use it with that product, it works really good. Cold foggers, anything like that. Okay, is there any other questions? If not, maybe we take a break, and then I'm going to talk about mycoinsecticides, which are fungus that kill insects after this. And that's another cool, that's some good slides there, and there'll be more prizes.